Oui, je t'entends. Un petit peu.
C'est quand tu veux.
Okay, so welcome back, everybody. So I hope that you have a blessed camp meeting so far. I want to thank you. Thank Clara for the song, because I really like this song. So we will have now the second presentation. And we will begin by a silent prayer. Amen. Okay, so that's the second part of our studies. So in the first part, we begin to see methodology. We try to understand the concept of simple to complex. And I hope that you see now that this concept is very important for us to understand. And I hope that you will see why Elder Tess begin by this concept when in the Vespers. So in the first part, it was methodology. It was not very practical. So now we will try to understand how it's applied to us. So at the end of the first presentation, we saw that this model was perfect. How it was designed by God to help us to understand the history that is complex. And we begin to see that we see the same problematic as the everlasting gospel. That is the creation of two classes. And we saw also that when Jesus talked about parable teachings, he said directly to his disciple that it will produce two classes. And we also see that in Daniel 12. And we understand also why Christ's teaching was rejected. And in himself, he was rejected also. So I think that we are familiar with these two classes. But what I want us to see now, so I will success on these classes. Okay, those who are willing to follow Christ, to be taught by his methodology, they will have to experience something in their vision. So I will say simply that they will have to go to the temple. So they will have to transition from the sample to the complex. And we will see the application for us in the reform line. But you can already see that the disciple they had misconception at the first place, because they did not understand the simple prophetic model, because they had misconception, and they distort the prophetic model. So they will have to make this transition to simple to complex. And they will have a better understanding. And we will see that for us, for the Sunday law, we will have to do the same experience. And we will see that we are always, maybe you don't realize it, but since 2019, we are in the same process. So okay, 2 minutes. I want just to choose with why I begin. Okay, so we will read Hebrew 5, verse 12 to 13. So you have to remember the word transition. And also two vision. So let's read the verse. So Hebrews 5, verse 12 to 13. From when for the time we ought to be teachers, ye have need that one teach you again, which be the first principle of the oracles of God, and are become such as have need of milk and not of strong meat. For everyone that useth milk is unskillful in the word of righteousness, for he is a babe. But strong meat belongeth to them that are a full age, even those who by reason of use have their sense exercised to discern both good and evil. Okay, so we will use this verse, use methodology to understand this verse. When I talk about using methodology, you know that I'm talking about comparing and contrasting. So the verse is saying that we are supposed to be teachers. And I will say, if you don't mind, adult. And he says that when you are teachers, adult, you use strong meat. Then the verse says that you are say babe. So the reproof in the verse, see, that you should be teacher, adult, but you are babe. And so it's a reproof. Okay. And when you are babe, you don't have the same, you don't feed the same way, and you cannot support strong meat, but you have to alk milk. So I will suggest, because I have a baby. I have a baby. I have a baby. Is 1 year old. It will be 1 year in maybe in 2 weeks. And he loves a lot milk. Every time we see that he love milk. And in fact, that's not a problem. What will be the problem? I will be worried if in 10 years or 20 years, he's still drinking milk, and that's all. So there must be what? Transition. So this transition, I suggest that this transition is the transition to the sample to the complex. Because we see that the disciple at the beginning, they were feeding with milk. So they were not able to discern. They cannot discern good and evil. But at some time, Christ was trying to make them do the transition. That they can have the complete vision and that they could discern good and evil. So I will suggest that from simple to complex, it's our methodology. As we see in the first presentation, how a complex history will be illustrated by a sample prophetic model. But the sample to the complex, it's also our experience. It's the experience that we should have. It's the experience that we had, in fact. Let me remind you. Alors. Okay. So I will draw a reform line. Not our reform line. So it's the end of the reform line of the priest. And I will suggest that there was a transition. So if we see that, this reform line, remind you something. So what we will see now so we were making a lot of study in 2014 to 2019. And basically, we were studying the American Civil War. And we were studying the North between the South. And what we were saying at that time. So north is good and south, okay? Is that true? I will say that it's true, but it's simple. Who would say that Luther, Calvin, the reformers, they are good, and the Pope is bad. We would say that Biden is good. It's bad. So I don't have the feedback from the Zoom, but I would love to have some feedback from you, and maybe you have some other thing that I have not in mind. But I will give you a last one. Yeah. Sorry. I think that we are familiar with this one. Okay. So left wing is good. No, right wing is bad. So what are we saying now? So we begin to see, and it was I think in 2020, I think it was at the camp meeting in Portugal, where we were discussing about the American Civil War. We begin to see that the North, there is a problem. So there is a compromise. So if we compare the two, and we have the sample vision, yes, it's true, North is good and South is bad. But if you look carefully to the details, you will see that, yeah, with the North, there is some serious problems. We begin to look at the life of Abraham Lincoln. And we saw that, yeah, the North was problematic. Then also in 2020, we began to look closely at the reformers. We began to see that, yeah, Luther, Calvin, they were racist, sexist. So we began. Then it's the same for Biden. And it's the same thing with the left wing and the right wing. So we know that on the media broadcast, because at the beginning, it was, yeah, CNN versus Fox News. Two streams of information. you have to go to the right source, right stream. So it was before 2019. And then we begin to see that, yeah, the light wind is a good stream. But when you read articles, you cannot take all that you find in the left wing. Because there is some problems. Some serious problems. So we see that as a movement, we made this transition. If we look carefully at the studies that have been developed by our elders, we see that we made this transition. What we have to understand is that the sample is correct. It's true. But it samples. You have to remind that the sample is there to give you the direction. You remember at the first study, you have the direction. But when you look closely, it's never as simple. But you see that the sample is true. So we will never come back into this year and saying that, yeah, we were teaching error. It's simply that we have made the transition and from simple to complex. And now we have a fuller understanding. So if we come back to the verse says that the strong meat belong to them that are full age, and they have their senses exercised to discern both good and evil. So here, you discern. And in our experience, we see that from 2019 to now, we have been able to have a better discernment. So I will try to find another example. And we will try to look at familiar prophetic models. So I hope that this is clear for everyone. That you see you really see the transition that we have to make. And I hope that you realize also that the studies that was bring by Elder Tess was directly, the goal was really to help us to make that transition. It's really how I feel it, you know. So let's look at, okay, so I don't want to erase because Okay. So we will try to look at another model that we are very familiar with. If I find my notes. So I'd just like to know how many time do I have. Okay. Okay, so okay, I will. So I'll just remind you that the verse that we read it's is directly from Hebrews 5:12 is taken from Isaiah 28. Because we have the same words. It says like, from whom I will teach knowledge, to them who are fed with breast and milk. But we are no more fed with breast and milk. Sorry. And then he said, because it's line upon line, precept upon precept. So I hope that we see clearly that for those who accepted Christ's teaching and the methodology, it's good. You accept the message, you accept the line, but now you have to move forward. And if you're not moving forward, you will leave the message. And we experience that for those who are in the movement since 2019. We saw people who were not able to make this transition. And they left us. So we will try to look at the lamb-like beast model. We find this model in Revelation 13. Verse 11. So maybe. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. So I will try to illustrate this model as I see it. So I see an alpha and omega. So this verse is covering all the story of the United States. For the beginning to the end. And we see that at the beginning, it's begin like a lamb. because they are flying the persecution from Europe. And they try to implement a government based upon freedom of conscience, freedom of religion. So they have this Lambert characteristic. And then at the end, they deny this principle. And they begin to speak as a dragon. So I would say that this model is sequential. Okay, because we have one state and another state. The problem is when we, with the understanding that we have with this model, we begin to have a false view of current events. When Donald Trump was elected, we saw his characteristics, and we begin to see that, oh, the United States, they will act like a dictatorship. There will be a martial law. And we begin to imagine something that was very far from reality. But I would suggest that this verse, Revelation 13, verse 11, a different application. And so we will see a quote on the quote. If we had read carefully the quote, that in great controversy, page 442 to paragraph 1, it says, the lamb-like horse and dragon voice of the symbol point to a striking contradiction between the profession and the practice of the nation thus represented. So here you see contradiction. So if you see contradiction, so you see contradiction between profession and practice. That means that it must happen at the you see this situation at the same time. So the lamb is the profession. And the dragon is the action. So that's quite different, isn't it? So it's, I would say, simultaneous. I hope that you see the board. Yeah. So in this model, we see that it's happened at the same time. And we have a better understanding of the reality. Because we see that in reality, the United States, they will always profess to be Lamb. They will always profess to be democracy. But when we will look at the action, and we already we are already seeing that in the news. The contradiction between the action and the profession. So we can see that at the first place, we distorted the model that was given to us. Because we were imagining dictatorship, martial law with Donald Trump. Because we had only this understanding. Which is the sample. And we had to make the transition to the complex, which is what we are seeing right now in the United States. So we had to make this transition. But as we can see, the sample is still truth. Because at the end, they will act like a dragon. But you have to make the transition to see the complex. Okay. I don't know how many time do I have. Okay, so we will come back to so Elder Tess, when she began the Vespers, I think that she wanted us to make this transition from sample to the complex. In regard to the Sunday law. In relation to the Sunday law. So we will read some extract of the Vespers. I hope that you see it. Yes. Okay, so in the first study, she said, and to approach that complicated history, we discuss how complex history is versus the prophetic narrative or the cliché that Adventism developed. So the reality is that these stories, they are both complex. That's the reality. But the way we see it, simplistic. So if we see that, because you see that there is a relation. So if we see 8088 simplistically, how can we understand the current Sunday law? So that's why the first step that Elder Tess bring us was to come back to the 8088 history to see the complexity that you have in this history. So it begins in 3 steps. So you have the Brazilian camp meeting, in Brazil, the School of the Prophet in France, and then you have the international camp meeting in Germany. And at that time, the vision that we have for the Sunday law before it was 2000, it was in the year 2019. So it was March, August. So we were on the vision, the basic vision, Sabbath versus Sunday. And so Elder Tess bring us back to the 8088 history. You see that we were looking in the wrong direction. That we were not understanding correctly this history. And we began to understand for what 80 John was fighting. And we begin to see that 80 John were fighting for 3 things. He was not defending Sabbath versus Sunday, but the respect of the Constitution, separation of church and state. The government cannot enforce a specific day to a people. The respect of the freedom. the inalienable rights. The government has no rights to decide for you, for your belief, for your religion. And the protection of the minorities. Okay. So that was the first step that, and you have to remember that the idea, the main thing is that we have a simplistic vision, very, very simplistic vision. And we had to understand the complexity of this story. And the first step was to understand what 80 John was fighting. Then we arrived in August at the French School of the Prophet. And Elder Tess will use methodology and she will compare and contrast two books, Spiritual Gift and Great Controversy. And we will understand that the what we called Sunday law can be different in relation to the generation. And then at the German camp meeting, the international camp meeting, we formally announced that the Sunday law is not about Sabbath versus Sunday. And she shows that we are in the increase of knowledge about the Sunday law. And I remember I was sitting there at this camp meeting. And it was a shock for me. But I have a strong conviction that it was true. Because I was reading some quote from the book Last Day Events. And I couldn't understand why Ellen White was saying that the Sunday law is, she was talking already at the Sunday law in our time period, and I couldn't understand. And it was clear for me now. And I remember at the end of the presentation, I came to Elder Tess. Came to her and I told her that, yeah, it's a strong saying to say that it's not Sabbath versus Sunday. But for me, it was already making sense for me. So I don't know how many time to. So I have 5 minutes, so I will have to conclude. So I will not have the time, but it will be interesting to do the same exercise, but with 2014. Because you know, if I ask the question, by the way, what event do we mark for the Sunday law in 2014? So what will you answer? So we can see that there is no one event. Okay. So I have a little more time, so we will try to look at this history. So we have no specific event for 2014. And if I would ask you the question, what do you mark for 2014? I know that there will be a multiple answer. Some people will talk about Cambridge Analytica. Some people will talk about the takeover of the Republican Party. With Steve Bannon, Stephen Miller. Some would talk about the blocking of Obama judicial appointment. Some would talk about the Hobby Lobby case. But already we saw that in 2014, the Sunday law is a complex history. It's not one particular event. It's not one. You have some subject, some topic, and you have multiple histories. But you see already that you have, in 2014, a movement that is rising to power to enforce Christian conservative morality. So it's the same as in 1888. We have Christian morality enforced in the Constitution. So we can already see that in 1888, we had a takeover of the Constitution to make it Christian. At least an attempt to do that. An attempt, tentative. And 126 years later, we have a movement that is rising to take over the Republican Party and to put in place a conservative president, Donald Trump. And Trump will place conservative judges that will interpret the Constitution in a certain way that will make the Sunday law possible. So what we see is that we had to come back to 88, so, no, sorry. Elder Tess, bring us back to 8088. But we could also come back to 2014 to see the complexity and to understand better the complexity that we are living right now. Okay, so we arrive at the end of the presentation. There will be a lot more to say. But I hope that you will retain that you will have the principle. That the sample to the complex is the continuation of our methodology. But the sample and to the complex, it's also our experience. And the experience that we had here. And I hope that every one of us, you will see that you will not step back and continue to the process, to the sample, to the complex. As we saw it in the Bible, with the milk and the straw meat, but also that to the experience that we went through. So I've finished my two presentations. I hope that it was clear enough. And so it was a great time for me in presenting, but also in preparing these studies. I hope that it will encourage you to study the Vespers. And that you will see the necessity to study the Vespers. To better understand the history that we are living. And the Sunday law that is approaching. So we will kneel down for prayer. Dear Lord, we want to thank you for your love for us, for your care, your guidance, for the methodology that you gave us, for the experience that we had in this movement. I pray that you will still keep us on this platform, that we may not step back, and that we may continue under your guidance. Please bless the camp meeting, all the persons who are attending to this camp meeting, also the technical parts. And may we be attentive to the next presentation by Elder Parminder. In the name of Jesus, we pray. Amen.
So we want to thank Michael for the 2 presentations of this campaign. Those meetings will be published soon on the different platforms. May we spend time to rewatch all of them. And study so that we can better understand the thoughts shared in there. Our meeting is now finished. And we will meet at 6:30 French time. To continue the study with Elder Parminder. Have a good meal for those who will eat right now. Happy Sabbath and happy week to everyone. May God bless you, and we'll see you soon.